What if I told you that this seemingly quirky amp part called the Phahd scaffold is able to turn the way you play Warframe upside down? Don't believe me? Just watch this video and I'm sure you will find a use for the Phahd scaffold in your Warframe loadout. The Phahd scaffold is often referred to as the X4X. This is because amps in Warframe can be assembled from different parts, and based on the order in which you unlock them and which they were added to the game, the community decided to give them numbers. Every amp consists of a prism, a scaffold, and a brace. The prism determines your primary fire mode, the scaffold your secondary fire mode, and the brace is there to mostly provide you stat boosts for your crit chance, status chance, fire rate, etc. As the Phahd scaffold part is obtained as the fourth option for all scaffolds, it fits into the middle of the number code with its number 4, hence the X4X. As I said, braces in amps are mainly there to provide stat boosts, but every amp part has certain base stats associated with it. A nice resource that I can link to is the amp builder tool on semlar.com, which allows you to view final amp stats without having to actually craft them, informing your choices before you spend time grinding the syndicate to purchase the parts you wish to build with. Now, with that general description of amps out of the way, let me dive into what the Phahd scaffold actually does. When you use the secondary fire on your amp, which has a Phahd scaffold in the configuration, you will shoot out a glaive-like projectile that's able to bounce up to a total of 10 times and is able to hit a maximum of 4 enemies. On each bounce, it's able to deal damage, and if it procs a void bubble status, it can hit the same enemy multiple times due to becoming trapped and magnetized to a single target. Now, where this gets really messy with spaghetti code is when you fire the glaive in your operator or drifter and then swap back to your Warframe. At this point, the glaive is still able to deal damage, but the damage type it deals cannot be attributed to anything in your current loadout. As such, it counts as both no damage type and every damage type at the same time. And to clarify, with damage type in this context, I mean primary, secondary, or melee damage. This now universal weapon damage is able to proc anything and everything in between, ranging from weapon augment mods to unique effects and even on-kill effects or arcanes. Before I give clear examples on what the Phahd scaffold is able to activate according to the testing done so far, I have to give a massive shout out to Kaylee in Kai's Warframe Discord. I asked both Kai and Kaylee if it was okay to make a video on this, and they both said that I could go ahead. I will have a video of Kaylee discussing the miscellaneous damage, as she calls it, linked in the description below, and I definitely recommend checking that one out too. Then let's talk about what kind of other parts you need on your amp for maximal abuse of the Phahd scaffold. First, for the prism, you can take what you like. Then for the scaffold, of course we use the Phahd scaffold. And finally for the brace, I would recommend the Lauren brace for more Phahd status chance. However, testing indicated that this may or may not work, and in this case, if it doesn't work, you could also use the Certus brace for more crit damage on your prism. As for the interactions that the Phahd scaffold has and the things it's able to proc, first and foremost, the Phahd scaffold is able to proc melee influence. Melee influence by the Phahd is only procced if you also are using Virtuous Surge on your amp. This is an arcane that will convert 96% of the void damage done to electricity damage. As always, don't trust any tooltips, as the 98% listed is actually tested to be 96%. Classic DE. Now, when we get a melee weapon that does not have any mods, just melee influence and the Phahd secondary fire, now also equipped with electricity from Virtuous Surge, we can see that we can both trigger and benefit from the melee influence effect, since every hit of the glaive counts as melee damage. Being able to trigger melee influence is where the fun starts, as electricity procs applied via melee influence count as melee damage as well. These will specifically activate augment mods like Vulcan Blitz or the Burning Hate. These effects can be triggered by the Phahd itself too, but the death has to occur from a direct hit, which is way too unpredictable. Instead, by using melee influence, we are able to consistently trigger things like Vulcan Blitz explosions, which will wreak havoc amongst enemies. Combining this further with abilities that can also inherit these effects, like Zephyr's Tornadoes or Nova's Molecular Prime, creates amp nukes that can go absolutely bonkers. I mean, look at these damage numbers coming from a freaking amp. Anyhow, as you can now probably begin to guess, this is where we can also begin triggering other quite handy effects like the passive of the new Venato Prime melee that will give you Tau stacks. The Burning Hate augment, as I already said, to increase your status damage, or even the Devotion passive from the Evensong bow. But my personal favorite has to be Disarming Purity on the Panthera, which will have a chance to disarm your enemies, leaving them with only a silly little dagger. I will now quickfire through some of the other options that you also have for triggering via the Phahd scaffold to not waste any of your time. Amalgam Argonac can be triggered if you also equip a dagger. This will cause AoE armor strip, which is pretty insane. Exodia Force can be triggered from Zaz alongside melee influence, giving you a nice damage increase. Remember that you can also combine this with Amalgam Argonac if you create a Za that also counts as a dagger. Invocation mods from the Grimoire can also be triggered, but do require you to have cast the Altfire at least once in a mission and for you to hold the Grimoire out while firing the Phahd amp. Sadly, Canticle mods of the Grimoire won't be activated. Secondary Fortifier on secondaries will also be triggered to give you passive overguard, which is something that I also recently covered in my secondary Fortifier video. Pax Arcanes from kit guns can also sporadically be triggered, as they require a direct hit from the Phahd as well, which is, as I said, way too inconsistent. You can also activate Amalgam Target Acquired on the Daiku if you use a Nekana as well, also for lifesteal. You can spawn Miasmites from the unique effect of the Pathicist, and, for instance on the Rakta Dark Dagger, its unique effect will be able to trigger, which together with Secondary Fortifier means you can now generate both Overshields and Overguard with a single weapon, being the Phahd Scaffold. Just make sure that you prime enemies with Radiation first for the passive effect of the Rakta Dark Dagger to occur. Oberon mains, it's time for you to finally shine. As for the on-kill effects, the Okina Incarnate can be used to spawn additional daggers. The Dual Ichor can be used to create toxin fields, and the Spinner Axe can be used to explode your enemies if you prime them with toxin damage. The easiest way to do this is by using Webbed Embrace from Orexia, as this is a subsume ability that you can put on any frame in the game. In terms of abilities that you can use in combination with the Phahd, I already mentioned Sever's Tornadoes and Nova's Molecular Prime, which are amazing. But if you want more damage, the only options you really have for subsuming is Roar and abilities that give you damage vulnerability, like Sentient Wrath from Caliban. Something important to note is that Warframes with Exalted weapons can trigger Arcanes, unique effects and augment mods on both the normal weapon as well as the Exalted weapon. For instance, using melee influence on your Hysteria weapon for Valkyr and using it on your regular melee will enable you to benefit from melee influence twice, which is frankly insane. Now, with all of those interactions out of the way, let's talk about some Operator and Amp Arcanes. As I said, to take the Phahd to the next level, Virtuous Surge is more or less required to be able to proc melee influence. So this slot is pretty much set in stone. For the other arcane, you can consider using Virtuous Trojan to add viral damage, which can be pretty nice. Just make sure that you use it as a rank 0 arcane, since you'd like to mostly deal electricity damage for melee influence. You can also use Eternal Eradicate, which is the meta choice, as it gives you an additional 60% damage after using an Operator ability. Ultimately, this second slot for the Amp Arcane is pretty much up to you, and you can fill it with any arcane that you prefer. For Operator Arcanes, I liked using Magus Anomaly, as using the Phahd for your main source of damage means you are constantly transferring back and forth from your Warframe to your Operator, triggering the arcane. Other options that I liked are Emergent Savior, just as a failsafe, or Magus Lockdown to lock down acolytes when they do happen to spawn. Finally, I have some extra notes before I close off the video and send you on your way to play around with the Phahd scaffold for yourself. For some arcanes, augments and effects, they require a direct hit component for the weapon they're equipped on. This includes, for instance, the 8 times damage that you get from Secondary Fortifier. There are also some augment mods and arcanes like Leaded Gas or Primary Crux that you can activate with the Phahd, but the Phahd will not benefit from the effect itself. The list of interactions for this weird spaghetti mess of code is absolutely endless. And the reason for putting this video out there is to encourage you guys to see if you can find some new ways to break the game with the knowledge that I've just given you. I may have also missed some interactions that were already discovered by Kaylee and myself, so I will link to the Google Doc that she created in the description, where she lists most of these weird interactions, including a bunch of cool stuff about Nova's Molecular Prime. There's also one downside to using this tech as far as I found, which is that the decrease in void damage from your Virtuous Surge causes your amps to deal significantly less damage to Spectral Thrax units. So if you are wanting to use the Phahd as your only source of damage in something like Void Cascade, you will definitely be running into some issues that you have to consider. Okay, so that covers all that I wanted to update you guys on for now. However, I will have some build videos coming out in the coming days, where I will go over some fully fleshed out example builds that abuse these weird interactions to their fullest potential. For now, as always, thank you for watching, and I hope to see you in the next one. Bye. Massive shout out to all members of the channel. If you want to become a member too, it's just $1 a month for all kinds of in-depth Warframe info, early access to some videos, and access to a members only chat in my Discord server. For now, thanks to Nike418, Tommel, Jamari Coleman, Mega Ninja, Dwang Nguyen Thai, Stud6ban1y, Pinter Aaron, Furkan Chebechi, Vixen Sage, Axel Larson, Fury Render, Blob, Ismael Pereira, Benjamin Cooper, and Nocent Linux Gaming.